we are. Hey, it's interesting that today is Earth Day, and there was like a leader summit of worldwide leaders that was happening at the exact same time, and I feel like they were our opening act because we're local leaders. That's what I'm here doing today. I'm excited to have conversation with everybody about climate change and climate action. I want to make sure that I get it correct. I am with members of the Mayor's Youth Engagement Council on Climate Action Initiatives. Did I do it? Ish. It was close. Mayor Youth Engagement Council on Climate Action Initiatives, Climate Change Initiatives. Y'all, it's a long name. You know that? Okay, I just want to make sure. I want to introduce you all so that we can get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll run into questions. First, we've got Jaya, who is our City Council District 9 representative, who attends ISA, International School of the Americas. Jaya, will you let us know what grade you're in? I know it's right here in my notes, but I'm like, you should be able to say hi. Let us know what grade you're in and which group in the Youth Engagement Council you are part of.
Hi, my name is Jaya. I'm a sophomore. I'm in 10th grade, and I'm part of the Housing and Transportation group.
Amazing. I'm going to go to Sarah next. Sarah, you are representing Council District 7. I guess I should say in Council District 9, it's Representative John Courage. In Council District 7, we have Councilwoman Ana Sandoval. You're at YWLA, Young Women's Leadership Academy, which is over by Woodlawn Lake. I'm mildly obsessed with YWLA. We already discussed it off camera. I love all the schools that are represented, and I'm mildly obsessed with YWLA. The YWLA people know it. It's fine. What grade are you in, Sarah?
I'm a sophomore, and I'm part of the biodiversity group.
We're going to find out all about what biodiversity means. One, because I enjoy saying just the word biodiversity. And then we've got Lauren in Council District 3, who terming out. We got Councilwoman Rebecca Piedran, who's been serving that district for 4 terms. And you are at the Frank L. Madla Early College High School. And please tell us the group that you are part of. All of a sudden I became British. Please bring your tea out and tell us exactly what grade you're in. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm a junior, so 11th grade, and the group that I represent is the Community Health and Food Security.
We're going to have a good conversation about that as well. And then our final panelist is Adam, who is at Keystone, representing my council district with Councilman Roberto Trevino, District 1. Please tell us all about yourself. And really, I just mean what grade you're in and the group you serve.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a senior, and I'm in the Infrastructure, Energy, and Recycling group.
Adam, we didn't talk about this before we came on, and I cannot express to you enough how much I love that you sound like the pilot on an airplane. It's so great. I love it so much. You can tell us when we need to land. It'll be so good. I want to start with a couple of things. One, I showed you, and I can't wait to show everyone else. Y'all, today, knock on the door. This showed up. My backyard is officially a certified wildlife habitat. Just saying, I've been working very hard at making sure that you have to have water and food, and not just bird seed, but like your plants have to be food. And I've been working very hard and allowing weeds to grow, because apparently they're not weeds. Apparently they're native plants, whatever. They look like weeds. I don't know anything about plants. I want to start with a pretty open-ended question, Lauren, and you'll be first, please. What is the Mayor's Youth Engagement Council for Climate Change Initiatives? Boom.
Yeah, so basically our group is essentially high school students that are passionate about climate change. We talk about a wide range of topics relating to the climate crisis. So environmental justice, social justice, redlining policies, and school to prison pipeline, and a lot more. Our goals, sorry, my cat is meowing in the background.
Yes.
Our goals are to educate ourselves and the city of San Antonio on these things and brainstorm about public policy I'm so sorry.
I
That
love
the
I love
environment,
that your cat is like, hey, I have things to say.
yes, brainstorm
Totally
about
fine.
public policy and essentially demand a call to action because climate change should be taken seriously. And this crisis will continue to affect us. And ultimately, our generation are going to be the ones to inherit this planet and the effects that climate change is going to bring on it. So what we do now is going to have a huge, huge effect on us.
Agreed. I'm excited about uh sort of the passion with which you're speaking, which I super appreciate. But I also am, and the passion with which your cat was speaking, also clearly a climate change activist. Um, I I'm intrigued. I know each of you probably joined for a different reason, and I want to start, Adam, with you, and ask why or what motivated you to join this council.
Um, I've been interested in city planning ever since I was a child because my parents are Hungarian. I've been privileged to be able to visit my family back home, and I was exposed to a whole variety of public transport and high urban density. So I approached our cities here in America completely differently. So I had a different lens to view things through.
Yeah.
And since then, I've gotten involved in reading some literature and studying city planning and seeing how it's kind of the backbone for democratic engagement, how we combat the climate, and so many other things. And I could not give up an opportunity to get involved in something like this.
I appreciate so much that y'all are doing something like this in the middle of a global health pandemic as well, right? That there's so many things that are connected within climate change and our health and where we've sort of been over the course of the last year. I want to know why everybody joined, and I'm going to go to you, Sarah. Why did you join this council?
I'm a military child and I was stationed overseas in Japan. And so that really opened me up to like the culture and like also caring about the environment and the world as a whole. And so it
Mm,
really fascinated me how like little changes like somewhere in Alaska can be a detrimental change in Europe or in the United States itself. And so I was like, why can't we just all get our stuff together and like fix this? And so
do
exactly.
it.
And so that's why I wanted to be part of this movement too. And I wanted to be part of this group so I can like help educate others and help enact change in our, even on a small scale, because like small changes can lead to big changes.
Yeah, 100%. So now I've got two of you who have said, hey, we visited other countries, lived in other countries or visited other countries and saw how it could work, how we could be doing certain things, and came back to the United States with like, hey, I'm ready. Like, let's get this stuff implemented. And now I want to know, is that what happened to the two of you? Did you both go off to another country, realize that we could be doing something different and come back to me? Jaya, tell me.
Actually, yes, my dad is also in the military.
Okay.
I was born in Germany, but I've also lived in Washington, D.C., in New York City. So it's not as like global, but it's still there. Um, yeah, so I actually just moved here a few years ago. And so after living in places like New York City and other places, I also like got to see many different perspectives of like homes, just how the landscape of everything and how different places handle environmental issues. And
Mhm.
so when I came here, I really just wanted to connect with high schoolers that were also super passionate about the environment. And so when I found out about the council, I was just really excited to get involved.
I, yeah, I love that. I'm like, I made a joke earlier that there was like a global leaders summit about climate change. And I'm like, sounds like we're doing that right here on a very own Zoom call. Lauren, I have lived in Corpus Christi, Texas and San Antonio, Texas. Are we together on this or have you lived all over the world as well?
No, I'm the only one. I've lived in San Antonio my
Okay.
whole life. I was born
All
and
right.
raised here. Yeah, I think for me, it's just I don't remember never not knowing about the climate crisis and like
Mm,
never not being passionate about it. So again, like Jaya said, like finding out about this and that there are others like-minded like me that who are interested in this and realize how detrimental this can be to our world. I think that just talking about it and coming up with new ideas was, yeah, really cool. An opportunity I really couldn't pass up.
Yeah, it's always enjoyable to sort of get into a room of people who also are passionate about the same things, right? To be able to sort of ideate and figure out what are the, to Sarah's point, just do it. That we just get together and just do it. Sarah, how can y'all all are part of it? How can other students get involved in this council?
So you can actually join our council.
Okay.
Later in this year, around August, September, we're going to have a new group of kids come in and replace us and get involved and educate themselves as well. They don't know exactly how they're going to like get the application out there, but be on the lookout on social media and like a public announcement for MYECCI. And it's just going to be like a virtual application, a virtual interview. But there's more than just our council to get involved with. Your schools can also get involved with the SAWS Impact Program, which is a competition to help, it promotes STEM and water education through service learning curriculum, presentations and field trips, and then as well as a school water conference that high schools can attend. Kids can also get involved with the Green Spaces Alliance, which has one of the neat things that, sorry, give me a moment.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. So they have conservation events that you can get involved with. It can be hikes, workshops, community gardening events. And so it's not just our group that you can get involved with. You can also just go out and like go to your community gardens and get involved with your community and like enact change on a small scale.
Yeah, I love that. There's, I mean, organizations like Gardopia Gardens, which is doing some really great work, and Black Outside is an organization that specifically works with Black teens, and they go and they can learn more about nature as well, which is also very cool. The idea that you've got, so you have to apply, right, to be on this in this group. So you all got accepted. Your applications apparently were stellar and you got accepted. Sarah, tell me age ranges. Like, is it only high school students? Is it college students? Is it elementary kids? Like, who can join?
Unfortunately, it's only high school students. So 14, 15 to 17, 18.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Jaya, I want to move into something like more specific. And we've got some comments and questions that are coming in from the Facebook Live, which we'll get to. And I'm so excited. So thank you. Keep those coming. And I'm happy to have Melissa and Sonia watching. Hello, friends. Jaya, recent research that just came out shows us that San Antonio's CO2 emissions dropped significantly in 2020. Right. We're also having calls federally for slashing greenhouse emissions by 50% or right over the course of the next decade. And basically what we're hearing or what we know is that the CO2 emissions dropped because people were staying home and weren't driving as much. Right. Because you are a member of the Housing and Transportation group, what can you share with us about transportation and housing and their impact on climate change?
Yes, for sure. So the pandemic has definitely lowered carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions, but I think the real challenge now is keeping the emissions down as places open back up. So transportation like cars and planes emit a lot of carbon dioxide and methane, which actually increases the global temperature. According to some recent studies, actually the global temperature has increased to around 1.84 degrees Fahrenheit. And while this may seem like a small difference, this causes things like rising sea levels, animal extinction, and melting glaciers. Housing also heavily impacts the environment because every time we build, use, or demolish a house, we are depleting natural resources and disrupting habitats. While we all can't just stop living in houses, being conscious of our actions is a great way to emit less. The pandemic has definitely given me, and I know everyone else, a chance to restart and rethink how we are impacting the environment. So even small changes to our daily lives can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I appreciate, you are obviously much smarter than I am, particularly about this. And I want to like the little things that we can do in our homes. And I know, I mean, I've heard this from my friends. I know I started composting, and I started a garden, and I started a natural habitat that's now been certified, whatever, it's fine. Yeah, there was something about sort of needing to be outside, and then also having space inside your home where you became sort of more aware of what was happening within your own home. So I'm recycling, like I'm just doing things differently. When you think about transportation, I want to talk about housing too, but when you think about transportation, the amount of time I have not driven my car over the last year is real. And I'm like, in a city like San Antonio, which we've built sprawled out, right? It's not like you can walk to a bunch of places very easily. We've created sprawl, which gets to Adam's point around planning, right? What do we do? How do we cut emissions in transportation as people, as humans?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think I'm also really thinking about that as I start thinking about going back to school and everything. But cars definitely emit the most pollutants out of every type of transportation.
Okay.
So carpooling, using electric cars, and just taking public transportation or biking are some really easy and great ways to kind of lower your emissions.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's also like an opportunity for institutions to get engaged, is where my brain immediately goes to, like, hey, as a company, are you incentivizing your people to carpool to work, or giving them bus passes, or right, like what are the incentives that we're also providing to sort of reduce barriers to being able to not rely on a car, right? I want to move over, Sarah, to you and just say biodiversity. Huh? What is biodiversity? Help me.
The biological term of it is the variety of life in the world or in a particular habitat or ecosystem. So meaning that it's made up of all living things, plants, animals, even bacteria make up biodiversity. And so why is this important? More biodiversity means healthier ecosystems. And also the more species in an environment means that the environment is thriving, it's successful, and has more productivity. And so more species in a ecosystem, meaning that, so the more species increases the habitat's resiliency and natural sustainability, meaning that it's able to self-sustain itself, and that when natural disasters happen, it's able to like bounce back just like that. And so also more biodiversity means that more species in there, meaning if a species were to die off or go extinct in that habitat, there'd be other species to fill its place so that it wouldn't just all crumble. Decrease in biodiversity can actually lead to the loss of habitats and species extinction. So it's really important that we protect biodiversity in urban settings and also in natural environments.
What you're telling me, Sarah, is that I am contributing to biodiversity with my habitats.
Yes, those weeds, leave them there because that increases the biodiversity.
Okay, I will. I put a barrier around it. I don't do anything to it. It's out of control, which I have ridiculously documented on Instagram. That makes complete sense to me. Obviously, no one, maybe I'm wrong, maybe some people do, but I'm like, hey, diversity is good. What you're telling me, all over the place. We enjoy diversity. It's enjoyable. Okay, cool. Lauren, I'm coming to you because I want to talk about your community health and food security group. And I want to talk about food insecurity, food deserts in San Antonio. I know in your council district specifically, there was an entire push on doing like corner store. It has a real name. The campaign had a real name, and I'm like, but it was putting healthy foods inside corner stores, so there weren't as many food deserts. I want to know, we know 1 in 5 kids are food insecure in Bexar County. What does food security have to do with the environment?
Yeah, so millions of people across the United States have trouble just putting food on the table for their families. And there are so many factors that have an effect on this. Something as minor as like a zip code or a change in address can have an effect on this. And it can be the deciding factor on whether or not these families have remote access to getting good organic products. So, for example, in certain communities, particularly those affected by, say, supermarket redlining, their foods in their stores have been tested by pesticides, which can lead to more extreme health issues. And it's these communities that have to endure the direct effect of climate change that affects it agriculturally. They are the ones that do not have as diverse of products in comparison to other areas in different sections in our city. And it's more than just a statistic that you see. It's more than 1 in 5. These are actual people. These are actual kids. These are actual families that struggle with this and have to go hungry sometimes. Being food secure has everything to do with environmental and social justice, because if they are not being treated equitably, they will continue to endure these impacts if nothing is done.
Yeah, when you're saying communities, I want to make sure that we're putting sort of a fine point on that. We're also talking about communities of color being disproportionately impacted.
100%. 100%.
Right.
Yes.
And when you're saying that it like sort of is an ongoing and compounds, right? The idea that if a kid is hungry and then is trying to go to school and learn, which is impossible if you're hungry, right? There's so many compounding effects and it's all interrelated. So I'm like, yes, it's social justice, it's environmental justice, it's right.
It's like a snowball effect. Like the more you continue to ignore it, the bigger it gets and the more hard it is to be able to control. And like you said, it's disproportionately people of color. It's these communities that have to face these effects. And often people who are white, kind of like myself, do not see these effects that happen on these communities. So it's really easy to just turn a blind eye, like, oh, it doesn't affect me, not my problem. But it is your problem. And it should be everyone's concern that these people cannot be getting access to food. It's a really, really big issue.
It is, and it also feels I'm thinking a lot about sort of the idea that transportation and housing, you were giving us such like clear calls to action, Jaya, like, hey, right, we can recycle, we could compost, you could carpool, there's like such tangible stuff. The idea around sort of biodiversity is like, hey, let your weeds grow. That's actually good, right? So it's like a tangible thing I can do. And when we talk about food insecurity and like the compounding effects of that and how large it seems, we sometimes get stuck. And I just want to sort of put a finer point and ask you a question. We sometimes get stuck in the idea that it is infinite need and finite resources. We hear it all the time in policy. We hear it all the time in funding, like, but it's so big and there's so many like needs. And you've literally just laid out for us. No, we actually know the communities, and it's overwhelmingly communities of color. And we should be putting our resources there because if our entire community is not food insecure, it will affect our whole community and make it better. Yes?
Yes, 100%. It's definitely disproportionately these communities of color that are being hurt by this.
So so I'm like, I'm looking for, each of you are giving us such clear sort of like, these are target our needs, right? Like that seems pretty simple. And yet not, I just keep going back to Sarah being like, and then we just do it. Like, yeah, and then just do it. Adam, I am turning to you now. I know that mostly because we've been talking, you were so serious about city planning, and there was a question that came in from Melissa that was talking about tightly packed cities can be so much more efficient in terms of living space. I know I'm dabbling, Jaya, in the housing and transportation, but I'm just thinking planning. How can San Antonio build in more energy efficient ways? And Jaya, Adam, either of you can take that. If you want to start, Adam, and then we'll move over to Jaya.
Okay, so I want to touch on something that you were saying and Lauren was saying about this infinite need idea. And that sounds a lot like the Malthusian trap, where it's this economic principle and social principle that was created around 1800s and 1700s, where as population increases, there's fewer resources to justify and further increase. But that has been proven to be entirely false. So just right there, we have the resources; they're just not being properly allocated. But to answer your
Yes, that.
question, yeah.
I'm like, wait, are you running for something? I'm just going to vote for all of you right now. We're in the middle of an election. We can do it. It's fine. We just write you in. It's fine. I got it. Excellent. I'm sorry. Go back to your, yes, planning. And I'm like, yes, it's been proven to be wrong. Infinite need, finite need.
And yeah, and to answer your question, about that, I think it was Melissa who asked that question.
That's right.
If you look at our code of ordinances, which is kind of like a zoning code for us that influences where we can build stuff and what we can build on a plot of land, mixed use zoning, which is probably the best way to increase our city's density and decrease urban sprawl, is not even a type of zone. It's actually a special zone. So if you think about the Pearl or other places around San Antonio that have mixed use, that's a special zone that needs different approval processes to be able to be zoned that way. So,
explain, can you unpack mixed use just in case? What is mixed use?
So basically what we have in a lot of American cities in San Antonio is that a plot of land has to be zoned for a certain type of activity. So the house I'm in is a residential zone, which can only be used for living. There can be no commercial use. A mixed use zone, however, combines commercial and residential zones. So then you can have two types of uses on one plot of land, which also means you're probably going to have increased density because you can have a storefront on the bottom and you can have apartments or single family apartments even above it. So it's already a higher density.
You're making a case also, and I'm going to toss to you, Jay, because I think this gets to where you were talking about transportation and housing, right? You're making a case for, hey, if it's mixed use development in one space, I don't need my car as frequently. Am I making that up?
Yes, for sure. Because like, I think what makes cities like New York or cities better with when it comes to transportation is that they can walk places and they can utilize more public transportation. So the fact that San Antonio is spread out is what makes it so difficult. And the need for transportation is even higher. So I think, yes, that would definitely help the carbon dioxide emissions.
Okay. Lauren, sorry, Adam, I'm going back to you because I do want to talk about the fact that you are a senior. This is pandemic year 2021, right? That's what we're moving into. You're graduating. I assume you're about to shock us and tell us that you're going off to school to be a mathematician or an actor or a circus performer. What are you going to school for?
I'm going to school to study international relations. And if the school offers anything with urban planning, I'm still choosing between schools. Then I'll also try to major in that. But if not, also in economics. But I really love international relations and seeing how countries interact. And you can also relate that a lot to city planning and democracy. And there's so many connecting threads.
I'm intrigued then, right? As you sort of started there, hey, I visited other countries, which is what got me into thinking about urban planning and what we could be doing better in San Antonio, and then also with international relations. When you're thinking of other countries and climate change specifically, are there countries that you look to as like, hey, that country's doing cool stuff, or this is a great policy, or we could bring that here, and why don't we?
Honestly, I don't think so because I know a lot of people spend a bunch of time talking about how Scandinavian countries are doing so great with CO2 emission, decreasing CO2 emissions, but there's a whole other thing at play here where the emissions are just being offset to developing countries. So Norway, for example, is what makes most of its GDP is made up of oil exports, but it has subsidies, so residents can buy Teslas for cheaper. So there's this green image, but in reality, there is a totally different thing at play. And I think that's at any country that you look at that has on the face of it a green strategy, there is something else going on that is different. And I think that a lot of the discussion gets focused on what an individual should do, which it's great. An individual has to do something to focus.
Right.
I think a lot of the blame falls on companies and on governments, which have the real power.
That's exactly right. I think we consistently, particularly in talking about something as hard as like environmental sustainability and climate change, we go to the individual and say, hey, don't forget to recycle. And we're like, great, what's the recycling strategy that our local government has? How are we sort of putting the burden back on institutions and really asking them to sort of pick up and kick up their game, and really be accountable to what we're sort of demanding. I want to talk. I'm awful at geography, but you said Scandinavia and you said Norway. And that, of course, brings me to like Sweden. This is my segue, y'all, to Greta Thunberg. That was the segue. We know that the documentary is coming up at 7 o'clock. The world leaders opened up for us, and we are opening up for Greta Thunberg. Look, I have a show and tell because my book's behind me. This is my Greta Thunberg book that I just have sitting here. Like randomly, I don't know what it was doing there. Y'all, you got a preview of the documentary, and we don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but I want to know if you can each, and we'll sort of do round robin, each share one takeaway from Greta Thunberg's documentary, A Year to Change the World. We can start, let's go ahead and start with you, Jaya.
Yeah, I really loved her documentary. I found it very interesting. I think it really is just a reminder for everyone that this is our home and it's our generation's job to protect the environment. What makes Greta Thunberg a leader in this environmental movement is that she really just like speaks directly to the world and states exactly how bad things are getting. So just watching her learn about many environmental issues, I don't want to spoil it, and how they're being affected as a result of climate change, I think just really puts it into perspective even more how much the earth is already suffering.
Yeah, there's something sort of no nonsense, to the point, right, in the way that she communicates. And also, I find what's really interesting is that the four of you are doing it as well. It like there's no wiggle room for countering, right? Because you're just like, hey, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you argue this? It's clearly happening. Lauren, what was your takeaway from the documentary?
I know this is really cliche, but the biggest takeaway for me was that you're never too young to start making a difference. Like, I believe that she was 16 when they started following her around this documentary. Mm-hmm. And that's just like 1 year older than I am. Like, I'm 15. And I remember a close friend of mine told me, well, we're always told that we're the leaders of tomorrow. Well, like when we're older, we can make all this difference. But the ultimate factor is that we're alive now and we can make change now and advocate for change now. And I know it's difficult to do when we're young because there's only so much you can do, but you can protest, you can speak out, you can use social media as a platform and let your voice be heard, because you never know if you're going to inspire someone else. Like, I feel like when Greta first started this, she didn't know that her voice would be heard from all over the world, and even a documentary would be this popular. I just think that continuing to learn and grow in regards to like the climate crisis, I think is a really, really good thing for a lot of young people to do.
Agreed. Not cliche at all. Enjoyable. Fully. Adam, what was your takeaway?
It's like two different things. But first of all, I think that whenever somebody gains a lot of fame, they're immediately dehumanized in front of the eyes of people who are paying attention to the issues. So it really shows you the personal side of Greta and how she is a virtuous person, and will go to the greatest lengths to stay moral. That, and also I think it's a lot of these documentaries preach to the choir because people who watch them already agree that climate change is an issue. But I think it's important for somebody who is an opponent of a lot of environmental legislation, environmentalism, and also of Greta, to watch it, because it shows that she is simply there for a good reason. And it also helps you understand where she's coming from. Um, and I think that it's when your livelihood is threatened by these statements and by the fact that people are growing more aware of climate change, you have to understand why. And this is a good way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's like not only do sometimes the documentaries preach to the choir, it's also this sounds, talk about cliche, get ready. Like when you're a grown person and you're like, some kid's telling me something, right? And you feel it's sort of tune it out as opposed to like tuning in and really understanding this person is like speaking not only from the heart, but has actually done her research. Like she knows, right? What, Sarah, it's your turn, and I want to know what your takeaway was.
My takeaway is that it's time to open up your eyes and basically like wake up to the reality. The changes, our economy and our personal lifestyles have changed the world to such a point that it's no longer a choice to make small changes in our lives to like counteract the changes that we've done. It's time that we need to start making big changes. And so it's just like, this isn't just a small little movement no more. We had to make it bigger. We had to be louder about it. And so that involves like getting our local governments involved, calling out companies and like big corporations to start making changes because it's too late for small changes.
Yeah, I love that. Adam, you've got something?
Yeah, I know I talk a lot, but you just mentioned local government, and it's so important. So these two things, we have climate change and democratic decline throughout a lot of the world, and we're forgetting how important local government is. A lot of people grow up in cities where things are planned for them, things are built for them without their input. And whenever that link of political legitimation where a person gains familiarity with their government and can understand that they can affect what a government actually does and plan in local government plan a city for themselves, then there's a link that's broken. So immediately you're not linked with your government, and therefore you can make fewer changes that would actually benefit in the fight against climate change, and also therefore you're going to weaken your democracy over time. So it's this long-term cycle. And I think I'm looking at the chat and in Facebook, and I think somebody asked, how should the non-choir members be reached? And this is exactly how they have to be reached, through government. And local government is the easiest place to get involved, and also to make sure that more people can get involved, because it's the first link with government. And once you start working on that, then the rest of the things will come, and people who were normally not involved will get involved. Community outreach is very important. I think we were talking about that earlier. Is just the backbone of how we're going to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? That it's true. The amount of influence you can have on local policy and local government. A friend of mine, Drew Galloway, who ran Move Texas, used to say, I can pump gas next to my council member, right? I'm not going to pump gas next to the president, right? So I could be pumping gas and maybe pumping gas in a conversation about climate change is the wrong scenario, but that's what he said. But I'm like, oh yeah, right, you can meet him. And I also think, to the conversation a little bit earlier, it's also incumbent upon our local government to reduce the barriers to participation, full stop. It's not my job to try to figure out how to engage. It's local government's job to engage me, right? And then keep us engaged. And I think that's part of it. Jaya, I think about like this idea, y'all are engaging in your government. You're a council, you are communicating with your council members. And I know we talked about that the application will open, and young people can apply, high schoolers can apply, as y'all apparently are getting kicked off. Your term is up, and new people can come in. But I want to know, to this point, hey, if I'm not part of a council and I'm a young person and I don't have the right to vote yet, right? You're a sophomore in high school, you can't vote. How do I get involved in my local government then? How do I help affect change?
Yeah, so I think throughout this council, I've learned a bunch of different ways just by hearing from my colleagues and whatever. So I think like through your school, there's usually like a club that works with local government officials. And I know I have one at my school. And then also just there's many ways to contact the mayor. Mr. Nurnberg, we've talked to him a few times, and he's always open to ideas. And even you can write all of your council members, your city council members, just as on the city council page. So there's many ways to just get in touch with them and just try to get your voice heard.
I want to, there's a couple of questions and I want to go to that too, but one of the questions was very specifically like, what's a call to action? Like what's something that we could be doing? And I know we talked and I'll keep drumming it home that the burden should be on institutions first, but individuals can also make changes within their own lives on helping with climate change, because we know while we need big change right now, also the small things can add up if we're doing them properly. Can we do a round robin again, calls to action? Lauren, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for like people in San Antonio to realize is that this is a major issue, as Sarah said. Like, you can't just be like, okay, whatever. Because a lot of times, people, for example, people are just like, oh, this problem doesn't affect me. Oh, I don't care about politics. Not my problem, blah, blah, blah. You can't be doing that anymore, because there needs to be action taken now, or else the effects are like going to be seen in the near foreseeable future. Like for me personally, this looks like stop buying fast fashion. Like I personally I thrift, I shop local, I do small businesses. And I think it's just like you mentioned, it's the little things that can help. And also vote. You need to vote and you need to educate yourself on policy. Like we talked about how we're too young to vote. We're too young to vote for people who we want in our local government, but adults can. Like if you're over 18, could learn about policy, learn about the people who are running, because it's your job to do the things that we as young people cannot do.
I'm like, I pause because I'm like, preach. Yeah, of course you should vote. We're in the middle of a early voting right now, as a matter of fact. May 1 is our election day for all local elected officials, all city council members and our mayor, multiple boards of directors, a couple of propositions. I literally, Hamilton just popped into my head and I was like, do not throw away your shot. And I'm like, that's who I am. Musical theater. Well, the lyrics go through my brains, y'all. Hey, you said something real quick. I'm going to move to everybody else, but you said something, a term I have never heard, and I read a lot. What is fast fashion?
Yeah, so basically fast fashion deals with a lot of unethical production of, well, in this case, it's clothing. So you have a bunch of large corporations selling. I don't want to name corporations, but you have a bunch of. Okay, so we have Shine.
We know what
like
those
Shine.
are.
We have YesStyle. We have AliExpress. These corporations sell their products for extremely cheap labor. So we have people who are getting underpaid and overworked in this case. So which is why
makes full sense.
Yeah, and I understand that going thrift shopping is not an option for everyone. I understand that because there's no ethical consumption under like this current system that we have. But I think that try not to buy from these places as much, like try not to like order from Amazon like every single day. Maybe like something as simple as reducing it to like ordering once a month or once a week. That can be just something simple that people can do. And just for me, like I stopped buying from fast fashion for like about close to a year now. So I've not bought anything from these places and just shopped locally and gone to my thrift store in my community.
Yeah, you said thrifting and like going local, buying local is actually helpful to the environment as well, which I'm like, I had never heard the term fast fashion before. And I'm like, oh, I appreciate that a lot. All right, Jaya, let's go to you. Tell us that you've already given us 175 calls to action and I want one more.
Yeah, so I think like within housing in particular, there's super small changes like limiting food waste, short showers, turning off lights. But I think one that I've at least tried to like do in my life is limit how many animal products that I'm eating. whether it's like just red meat or it's dairy. Like, I know we live in Texas. I got it. Like, I know
It's
that's
hard.
more difficult, but especially for me, like, I'm not someone that I started off not being vegetarian or vegan, but I'm slowly trying to incorporate that more into my daily lifestyle, because I think that's just something that really impacts the environment and is like one of those big causes. And so even just slowly kind of working out and getting to that point where we're eliminating it, or almost all of it's eliminated, is really helpful.
I'm a vegetarian, so I'm like, yes, we should all do it. I also know that San Antonio's local food scene, particularly as it relates to vegan food, has sort of exploded over the last year, that there are so many more local restaurants that are offering just straight vegan food. And every time I eat vegan food from one of these restaurants, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Why is it so good? It doesn't make sense, and it's excellent. I'm like, I appreciate both of you have made sure to say, hey, it doesn't mean becoming vegetarian forever or right away or cutting meat out, right? It doesn't mean never shopping again at Amazon. It's like, hey, how can you limit it? How can you do a meatless Monday every week? How could you shop once a month rather than every single day using your Amazon Prime? I appreciate that a lot. It allows for people to sort of, even though we know that maybe you should just cut it out, we also know that people need baby steps, right? So I appreciate both of those. Adam, what's your call to action?
I think you should find an area of interest, and expand on it. Really try to deep dive into literature, news, current events relating to it, because then you'll find where you can actually um, affect that within local government. So I know that not all interests may apply, but a lot of them do. So for me, it was public transport. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there's plenty of places where you can get a start, and the best way to do that is seeing what you like, and expanding on that.
Yeah, there's just like, be curious, right? Be curious and go research something and see if it sort of sticks, which is amazing. Um, Sarah, I'm coming to you. Your call to action. I'm To be sure, my call to action is just do it. Just do it already. Sarah, what you got?
Honestly, the first step in doing anything is educating yourself on the topic. So even if it's small things like looking up your local bylaws or policies that you have on environmental issues, or you can just look up environmental justice news topics, like, stay current with the events, join environmental groups. They can be, I'm part of a Facebook environmental group, multiple. And so it's like just putting yourself in the atmosphere of where you can be aware of these issues, and slowly starting educating yourself, because then once you start doing that, you start making these choices and these changes in your lives that, like, you're like, oh, this is why people do this, so I'm going to do it too. And so it's just like educating yourself leads to choices leads to habits leads to change. And so first step,
I need that. I need that on a t-shirt, and I need it with your name on it, and there will just be snaps on the back, and that will be it. Y'all, listen, I spend a lot of time talking to grown people, adults who are responsible for policies and programs and services, and some of them are amazing and some of them not so much. And I will venture to say that the things that you have said today in concise, perfectly, like, hey, this is how it makes sense, obviously, has made me think that on occasion, maybe we don't just need a youth engagement council, although obviously we need a youth engagement council. And where can we start putting you into the other councils, and adding you to planning commission, and right, putting you on the different commissions and boards that exist in our local government and on our nonprofits. I appreciate this idea too about educating yourselves, tuning in for something like this, educated, sticking around for the Greta Thunberg, A Year to Change the World, which is coming up at 7:00. Another opportunity. Lauren, you had a last word.
Yes. I think going off of what you mentioned, a lot of the time the youth's voices and our voices kind of, and as you will see in the documentary, they kind of get like disregarded. Like they're just like, oh, what you're a teenager. What do you have to say? Like what you have to say isn't important. What do you know? Like you don't even know what you're talking about. You can't even vote yet. And I think that it's just like one, it should inspire, well, it personally inspires me to do more. Like, hey, even though I'm young, I know what I'm talking about, and this is a really major issue. And I just think that the more young people that get involved, like there's power in numbers. So the more you get involved, our governments will be forced to listen. Like, okay, this is a big deal. We need to address it now.
Yeah, y'all have there were no softball answers, there were no softball questions, and I appreciated how each of you showed up here. I've learned a ton, and it has made me incredibly happy to know that you exist in our city, that you're representing our city, that you're making like real change occur, which makes me excited. I want to make sure that we thank Headwaters at the Comal for sponsoring EcoRise and the Office of Sustainability for the City of San Antonio, and of course the entire Mayor's Youth Engagement Council on Climate Change Initiatives. Thank you. It only took me a full hour to get it correct. We know that you have partners in crime over there. You have partners in climate change over there, which I appreciate a lot. Thank you to all of you, to Sarah, to Adam, to Jaya, to Lauren, just for sharing your wealth of knowledge and for making us pay attention. And if you maybe want to do something, you vote, you educate yourself, you maybe do a meatless Monday, get curious about a topic and just do it. Good night, y'all.